An intellectual carrot, the mind boggles.
You see? You see? You're stupid minds. Stupid! Stupid!
Earth has had Santa Claus long enough. We will bring him to Mars.
I've been afraid a lot of times in my life, but I didn't know the real meaning of fear until I had kissed Becky.
One thing will be clear. It's not for man to interfere in the ways of God.
It's alive. Oh, it's alive. It's alive. It's alive.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Earth vs. Soup, episode 139. I'm Aaron Pollier.
And I'm Darlene.
We hit a movie today that actually has been shown on MST3K before. It's Attack of the Giant Leeches from 1959.
October, which puts this Yvette Vicker, the playmate,
Yes.
of July 1959. She was a playmate before she did this film.
Yes, but supposedly, now, we're going to have to talk about Yvette Vickers. Is she actually like the second build? Yeah, she is. She is second build in this movie. She supposedly posed in she did pose in Playboy in July of 59, and she talked about this movie in her pictorial, like the interviews. Like, some people say that she promoted this movie in her pictorial. Fine. Darlene, you've seen her pictorial. You can, there's nothing awful or very sexual about it. She's just, you can see butt in it, right?
Yep.
There's nothing weird. She did a whole bunch of cheesecake and pinup stuff back in the 50s. She is an attractive woman. She is used as an attractive woman in this.
She's used as the tramp in this.
She is used as a tramp
and she's
in this.
not. The other female has more lines and more.
Yes,
than this one.
But Yvette Vickers seems to have the larger chest and therefore is higher build. This is a 1950s movie where the female leads don't have a lot to do except look pretty.
Scream.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And they
actually do. Well, Yvette Vickers' actions do push the plot forward. I will say that she is important to the plot, but is she a character? No, not at all. We should also talk about Yvette Vickers' end of her life as well before we even get into this movie. It's not all, happiness and all that. She actually died and wasn't found for a very long time, like a year after her death.
I wasn't reading that.
Yeah, that's sad. It's sad. But I think she actually did a pretty good job in this movie. To be honest, I actually think it was.
The director of this one is Gene Corman.
Brother of Roger
Corman. And the
producer's Roger Corman, right?
No, producer was Gene Corman.
Okay.
This is what I'm trying to say.
Okay, go. I'm sorry.
And it's double billed with House of Usher, which is a Roger Corman film.
Okay, so Roger Corman was executive producer. Gene Corman was produced. It was the producer on this. That's fair. Okay.
It was shot in 8 days in Los Angeles County
What, Darlene? You can't read that? Arboretorium
and Botanical Gardens.
You wrote the note, but you can't pronounce it. That's
Nope.
fine. Okay, you know how to say it now. Arboretorium.
It's black and white.
Yeah.
70,000.
It's pretty low budget. But you know what? Like we said, when we first started, this was an MST3K. That means I have seen this movie. I've seen it multiple times just as an MST3K. Darlene, have you ever seen this?
I think I have.
Okay.
Probably with you
as an MST3K, yeah. I think this movie, before we start in on the plot, might actually have a worse reputation than it deserves.
I will say yes.
Because, again, looking on...
We have seen far ratings on
Go ahead, Darlene.
IBM, whatever it is that you use. Interdate.
Internet Movie Database, Darlene.
Thank you. We've seen ones that we just could not see why it got a 6 on it, and this is got a 3.7.
The 3.7 Internet Movie Database, and it has like an audience score of 17% on Rotten Tomatoes, but like a 70% on the tomato meter, which means that like critics actually liked it more than not. It's just the audiences hated it. Now, we only bring up these ratings to like give you an idea of what the overall feel of it is from a lot of people, because our opinions differ a lot of times from these reviewers and whatnot. And this movie doesn't deserve the low rating that it gets.
It's 62 minutes, so it goes 2 minutes over.
It does not deserve the ratings that it gets, because most of the movie is actually fairly well done. There's some things that do not work in it, and we'll get to that. But most of this movie actually is well paced. Things happen.
And one thing leads to another, to another, to another.
There's logic to it, which, I mean, that again, this is a low bar to be set, right? Like, a film always should have logic following A to B to C to D.
We have had things that don't.
And if the movie is succeeding at being a movie or a piece of fiction, I think we should say, well, you know what? It's doing its job. Is it doing it well? Maybe not, but it's not like a 3 out of 10 kind of movie. It means that if a movie is doing its job, that's like a 5 out of 10. If it starts doing it poorly, then it's worse than average, right? Like, anyway, let's get to the plot. And Darlene, you are going to have to speak about the swamp crab.
It's supposed to take place in the Florida Everglades. The Everglades is a swamp. It's a small, slow-moving river.
Yeah.
That goes through Florida.
Yes.
That means it's all deposited by sedimentary.
There's lots of sediments suspended in the water. It's a swamp.
It's a swamp.
We see much clear water in this. But I think that's because they want to actually show what's happening on screen, and I'll fine, whatever. At least in Creature from the Black Lagoon, they try to explain the fact that there is clear water by it being a spring, and they actually filmed it in a spring.
I can say that I have seen clear water in swamp. Just you didn't know how deep it was because the murk on the bottom is black.
Sure. So it's
so
tough to
you
see.
Could be pulling your P-roll
mm-hmm.
and only have an inch down, and then the next time you're looking at it, you might go down quite a few feet.
So let's start this plot. A man paddles a rowboat through a swamp at night, and I assume it's at night because it's dark. But again, this is black and white, and good day for night shots often just aren't really well done. I mean, most day for night shots aren't really well done.
Most of this film was dark.
You think that?
Yes.
I don't think so. But
unless they were indoors, it was very, very dark outside.
I disagree. There were many very well lit scenes outside.
Yeah, there was a few that were outside that were supposed to be in the daylight, but otherwise, it really.
So this man's out at night. He sees something strange in the water and opens fire on it. Okay, and most of the time I'd be the first person to say, "Oh, holy crap, you're just opening fire on something that you don't really see properly." It could be a person, but he is in the middle of the swamp. Something moving around towards you at night in the swamp is generally going to be dangerous. I don't blame him for opening fire. Correct?
No, I don't.
Okay.
We always carried a shotgun when we gigged for frogs.
Okay, so it squeals, it screeches, it runs off, and this guy takes a big swig of liquor. That's it. Goes to credits.
Credits were kind of weird.
They're okay.
They're okay, but they were kind of... It didn't fit...
It didn't fit the rest of the movie? Yeah. Okay, so we then go to a swamp bar. It's a bar, right? Like, it's not just... but it's supposed to be like a general store as well, correct?
Yeah, I think it's a general store, but it's a pub as well. or a bar, as you'd call it,
I
because they're
have
drinking.
I have questions immediately about this place. Okay, and the reason why I have questions immediately is we have been to swamp bars in Louisiana, obviously, but this place seems like it really isn't a legitimate business. Nothing about it really comes across as a legitimate business. It comes across as a way for Yvette Vickers' character Liz to launder money or something. And the reason I say this is we're almost immediately introduced to Liz Walker, who's played by Yvette Vickers.
And she's being nasty to her husband, which is this overweight
Dave Walker, I think is his
Dave
name.
Walker. Overweight.
Incredibly overweight.
Incredibly overweight.
Guy.
Incredibly older, like twice at her age.
But nice guy. I think he comes across. He
comes
comes across
across
as a
as-
suffering husband.
A suffering husband, yes.
So all these people are here drinking. She is.
Including Steve.
Steve's there, who was our main character, played by Ken Clark. So she comes out dressed like a prostitute.
What was she in?
A sex worker.
Was she in a
She's like in Daisy Dukes almost. Like Daisy Dukes in a tight blouse. Her breasts are on display. Not literally, she's not naked. There's nothing being shown. But you know what I'm saying. Like, everybody is ogling her. Openly ogling her. And her husband's like, why did you have to come out here like that?
And I don't blame him.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with a woman dressing the way she wants to. First off, there is nothing. But the problem is that we learn later that Liz is having an affair with at least one of the men in this bar.
The first man that goes down is with her.
Yes, is that
and I don't even know who that is.
Doesn't matter, does it?
It doesn't.
I think it's Dave.
Because that's where
I think it's
Dave Walker is her husband.
No,
Because she's
not Dave.
Liz Walker.
Crap. Is it Steve? His name's Steve. That's what's in my notes. His name is Steve.
Steven is the main character.
Well,
I don't even know. I don't even know who it is because Porky and Lim are the two.
Cal
Cal is her second lover. He's in that room.
God, okay, so there's no characters in this. Anyway, Liz is having an affair with at least one of the men in the bar. At least one.
Yeah,
maybe two.
But she goes out to meet this other person.
So she's being an utter bitch to her actual husband, okay, Dave. She then goes back into their room because they live at this bar/general store. All the guys are ogling her. She walks back in there and he's like, you need to not come out there and do that. You're a distraction. You're causing problems.
Yes, he did wait until she came back into the bedroom.
Yeah. And he never yelled. He wasn't even yelling. He's just like, honey, I love you.
She yells.
She yells, calls him names all the time. She's an awful human being. And so she then decides to tease him by like rubbing lotion onto her bare legs, stripping in front of him.
And then she says, you don't need to be looking at me like that.
Yeah.
And he goes, I'm your husband.
Yeah. And you're doing it right in front of him in your shared bedroom. Like, okay.
In a, what would you call that? That had Japanese on it.
She had like a kimono, like a silk kimono on. Then she drops that and is just in a bra and panties, and then decides to put on like this slinky dress and then take her panties off underneath it.
One of those dresses that are a stocking dress.
Yeah.
And then she pulls off her underwear. So she goes out the door with him yelling at her.
No, he was not yelling. He's just like, honey, you can't be doing this. You can't be doing this. And she's like, I don't care, screw off. Basically, she's just being an awful human being.
She goes out the actual door.
Yeah.
To meet somebody, and that person is the first one that's killed.
Yes.
And we don't know who he is.
Yes. So, boy, let's see here.
Because Steve has the big gun that was without the safety.
Yes,
Pointing it right in her face.
Steve and Nan, it's Nan. They are out there kissing by the swamp late at night. There's a scream. It turns out that it's Yvette, but there's this whole scene where Steve is a complete and utter jackass with gun safety. He pulls his giant revolver, finger on the trigger, and is holding Nan to his chest with the barrel in her face.
No, that was Liz because he rescues Liz.
No, that's Nan because they go out after that gun safety scene to find Liz screaming.
Okay.
Because they were making out and Nan was scared. The barrel was like butting her cheekbone. His finger on the trigger.
I still think that was Liz.
It's not. I even wrote it like twice. This is Nan. They go out and find Liz. Bad gun safety. The sheriff says the guy died from misadventure. Now Steve says, "Holy crap! How can you say this?" Liz isn't saying anything. Why does Liz not say anything about like what she saw attack this guy? Because
she's not even there. In that scene with the
she finds him already dead. Like they were going to meet out at the spot, and so this guy has like sucker marks all over him, right? Steve says, "Misadventure, dude. This guy was killed by like an octopus or a squid." And the sheriff's like, "I'm not going to go out in that swamp and look for a goddamn octopus or a squid when the swamp is fresh water. You're talking about something that lives in salt." And you know what?
He blames an alligator.
He blames an alligator, which is dumb. But again, what Steve is suggesting is also dumb. It's very dumb, right? So it's fair that the sheriff should say, "Look, I'm not going to go out there and look for a saltwater thing in a freshwater swamp. Sorry, buddy."
But you get from the sheriff at this point, the sheriff is telling Steve it's his job because he's the county sheriff. You're the state. Stay out of my business.
He's like the state fishery and wildlife guy. Like that's the reason he's there. And so Steve tells the sheriff to go soak his fat head. And I thought there was going to be violence. Correct? Like he goes, "Go soak your fat head." And the sheriff gets up out of his chair like freaking scowling at him. And his hand goes to the butt of his gun. And I'm like, wow, those are fighting words down here in the swamp of Florida. Dude, chill out. Have a Bud Light. You're okay.
No, have that moonshine that everybody's drinking.
So Steve gets the hell out of there. He's going to go hunt for the creature. He goes out on a rowboat, and he's with Nan in the rowboat. Nan gives Steve coffee while strange noises are being heard. Like, she's like, "Can I give you coffee, honey?" "Sure." And they're just drinking coffee out in this like rowboat in the middle of the swamp in the middle of the day. I don't know. It's such a weird scene because literally the only thing she has to do there is give him coffee. Like she's a secretary. I expected her to get like dragged out of the back of the boat. I expected her to do something other than pour coffee out of a damn thermos.
Well, that's what she did.
But that's what she did.
That was what she was being, was a girlfriend.
See, and here's what I'm saying. This movie isn't as bad as what people think it is, basically, according to us. It's still a bad movie. There's still things that are incredibly frustrating in this. Okay, so back at the bar/general store, Liz and her husband argue, and I wrote down, she is a real bitch. She wants him to sell out his entire business, which has been his life's work, building up this bar, general store, whatever. And he is just the suffering husband. He's just listening to her.
And he's got to deliver. She calls him a
fat bastard.
And he's got to do a delivery.
And she is just furious at the fact that he has to deliver to this old lady.
He has to deliver this old lady that her husband just died.
So you can tell that this character is written to be the most unlikable character there is. For good, I mean, she is. She's awful. So he leaves, and her second lover, Cal, comes in and says, "I like what I see, honey. Why don't we leave and go someplace?" So they go out to the swamp, the edge of the swamp, which is the worst place to go if you want to make out with a woman and have sex.
They show it's great filming.
It's good.
They had
Good scene,
had a empty car that they were filming.
Yeah.
And then you kind of see that they're right on the other side of the car in the grass next to the swamp.
Yes, and you kind of think they might, for like a split second, you think, are they dead? Were they dragged out of the car? No. They are suggesting that they've had sex and that they've just gotten dressed.
And they're bad-mouthing Dave.
They're bad-mouthing Dave the entire time. Like, that fat slob, what does he have? Oh, you wouldn't understand. He saved me from my first husband because my first husband was a drunk and a bank robber, and he beat me. And it's like, are you trying to develop sympathy for this character as a scriptwriter? Because there is no sympathy for her. She's cheating on her husband with 2 separate men, bad-mouthing him to his face. And you're trying to explain why you think he's a good guy because he saved you from another abusive relationship when you are arguably just as abusive as your ex-husband was.
Just not physically.
Well, I guess not. I don't think we do see her hit him at all.
She just throws things.
Which is still physically abusive, but she's more emotionally and verbally abusive. So I say Liz and the douchebag are making out. Her husband finds them making out, and he marches them at gunpoint.
Well, this is a twist because you're thinking the leeches are just going to come out and grab them.
Yeah, but no, it turns out that
Dave chases them through
the swamp, and he's like, "Come on, get up, get going." And he's like, "Dave, I'm sorry, we can come to an understanding about this." And he starts opening fire on him to chase him through the swamp. Okay, fair enough. He chases them through the swamp up until I don't know, it's just some random scenes, right? That they're slowly moving through the swamp as Dave fires at him. He finally marches them into the swamp water, and Cal is begging for his life. And Dave really isn't a bad guy, I guess. He's like, "No, you can get out. I'm going to spare your life." And the thing is that by this point, the giant leeches have gotten Cal and Liz and dragged them away. Okay?
In front of Dave.
So Dave goes directly to the police and goes, "Look, I caught them cheating together. I held them at gunpoint in the swamp. I told them to get out, and leeches, these giant creatures, took them."
He didn't know what they were.
But he said these creatures
He called them monsters.
And they arrest Dave for murdering Cal and Liz.
And David hangs himself in the
jail.
cell.
And I'm like, holy crap, dude. This poor guy. He didn't murder these people. He's actually not a bad guy. He was going to let him go in the end. He's like, "I don't want to see you again. Get out, you horrible woman."
And then the next scene, right after the hang thing, that was just a short little.
But that's pretty shocking. Man, we see Dave's legs just dangling.
Steve, Nan, and Doc. Doc is her father.
Yeah.
Talking about the 3 deaths.
Yeah. There's a lot of people that have been going missing. But remember that they get the sheriff gets a couple old guys, promises them $50 each
That's
to go
the
out
next
and get
scene.
bodies. Yeah.
See, you're doing what I do.
Yeah.
You're a scene ahead.
Fine.
Because Porky and Lem get talked to by the sheriff and get $50 per body to go find them.
$50 each per body.
Per body?
Yeah.
Each.
It's good money. Good money for rowing out in a pirogue and punting around for alligator caves to knock out bodies. So one of them gets scared that it's so quiet, right? They're like, there should be a whole bunch of gators here.
There should be a lot of gators there.
So they start going
Porky
back.
notices.
They start wanting to go back.
Yep.
Because they're scared. And then the giant leeches attack.
Yep. Knock over their things, and
they get dragged into a
cave. And all 4 of them get dragged into a cave.
All 4. No, it's both the old guys that were in the boat, and then we see Cal and Liz also in this cave. It's actually kind of like a dugout underground, half in the water, half underwater, and the leeches are feeding off of all of them.
You can't have a swimming pool
I know that.
in-ground
You know that.
swimming pool
Yellow Dog knows that.
in Louisiana or in Florida, you can only take down the water maybe a foot or two without it shooting up from the bottom.
Maybe the leeches are passing enough gas that they're creating
They are.
overpressure.
They
down
are.
there.
We got to talk about that gas problem that the leeches have too.
There is lots of gas bubbling up out of the swamp, enough that it would be a concern to be out on the water. Either because it's either bubbling up a lot of CO2 or a lot of methane.
And when you see that in the swamp, you back off and hope you don't pass out.
So everyone that's left goes out to search for the missing people. Steve refuses to use dynamite to try to bring bodies up because he's actually being a completely reasonable fish and wildlife guy. He's like,
yes,
no,
and I like that scene.
Yeah, it's a really good scene.
Because Steve is talking to Doc, and he goes, "The sheriff's not going to do a search party.
Yeah,
so let's get a search party going ourselves."
But he says, I'm not going to drop dynamite to bring up bodies because it will kill every fish and animal in that lake. And it took centuries for Mother Nature to bring this balance to this lake. And I'm not going to wreck it. And I'm like, good job. That is the correct answer, sir. We do not dynamite a lake. We do not throw chemicals into it to take all the oxygen out of the water like they do in Creature from the Black Lagoon. We don't do both of them. Correct?
Yeah.
What happens in this movie, Darlene?
They have dogs.
They have dogs, which is smart.
Do you know what dogs and alligators? That's their favorite.
I know, but what do they do after the dogs, Darlene? Dynamite.
Yeah, well, first you have Doc talking about dynamite. And Steve goes, "No, I'm going to go find out if there's any contaminant because we didn't see any alligators there.
Yep.
And any big life. See if there's a contaminant in."
Doc is the one that starts dropping bombs into the freaking lake.
And after that, I'll go to Port something or other. Point or Pint?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Matter.
Go someplace to get diving gear.
Yeah.
And Doc says to Nan, it's going to take him a while to get that
yeah, so I'm just going to try to drop
and so he goes out there with his little hat.
Yeah, his little fishing hat and boat and starts dropping big old bundles of dynamite in the lake.
And lights the dynamite and drops it in.
And he rows back to the shore, which is actually smart. He put a large enough fuse on it that he was able to row back. And then he looks at him and goes, "Should be any minute now." And then boom! And all the bodies, like all the dead people that were in this Leeches cave, fall into the water and drift out, which is actually also a well-shot scene. It's kind of creepy. But Liz is still alive at this point.
Yeah, and her body is not, no Liz's body.
But they see all the other bodies that are all tore up with these suction things because the giant leeches have been feeding from them, right?
And as Doc comes from the autopsy of these people, Steve is talking to Liz and says, "Yes, I have to arrest him."
Steve is talking to
Nan.
Nan, not Liz. You said Liz.
Oh.
I have to arrest these guys or whatever.
I got to arrest your father because he did the dynamite. And
he needed permits for it. Because that was one of the other arguments that Steve was using, that, hey, man, it's going to... even if I wanted to do this, it's going to require permits.
And a lot of paperwork.
And a lot of paperwork. You know what? That's never stopped anyone with dynamite in any of these films, by God.
It didn't either.
Dynamite might be found in every corner store in the 1950s.
So the autopsy comes off with Cal was not shot. There's no blood in any of the bodies. And there's what looks like a giant leech mark on their necks.
Like, oh my God. So Steve and
the first stage of rigor mortis has just set into them.
Yeah. So Steve's going to start diving he's going to start diving on the lake, and he ends up messing up one of the leeches, wounding one of the leeches.
Oh, but I have to talk about the bubbles. All these people were standing out there with the boats, watching the divers start to go out.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of bubbles coming up.
So at some point, Liz slips into the water. Liz slips into the water in the cave.
Yeah.
And she drifts to the surface. And
there's Mike the diver.
'cause I
Steve
think-
goes down, and then that's when Doc talks about the atomic energy at Cape Canaveral is causing the gigantism.
and that's like no. Cape Canaveral didn't have a nuclear program.
Because you couldn't. Because of
Outer
what?
Space Treaty.
Yeah.
Well, actually, this is pre-Outer Space Treaty, but still, it's not like Nerva engines were actually being tested in Florida. They were being tested out west at like White Sands and things like that. Look up Nerva engines, folks. They're pretty cool. They're real technology. You see them actually in For All Mankind season 2 and 3 now.
And Steve tacks the leech with the
and Liz slips in. Liz's body slips into the water
and floats up, and Mike goes after Liz's body, and then
she has a wet t-shirt moment.
Oh yes, there was a moment with Mike the diver.
He was like, but she's dead, which is weird.
No, when he was letting Steve down.
Yeah. Oh yeah, where we actually thought this. No, okay. For those of you under 18, skip ahead a little bit. We honestly thought at one point in this movie,
his tight little
he has like tight diving briefs on, and there was one moment where you turned to me and you said, "Aaron, are his balls out?"
No, I didn't say his balls out. I said those are the big. He's got some big.
Well, yeah, because there's a bulge there, but.
Big bulge.
And I'm like, okay, well, we need to see this really quick because it's fair, right? Like this is fair. We do.
He had a bulge.
Yes, but when we paused it, it looked for a moment like his balls were out.
And it's just the light.
It's just the lighting. But I was honestly shocked. I said to Darlene, I went, Darlene, if his balls are out here, and we actually had to look. We were both like. We're going to mention this in the review that his balls are out, and we're just going to,
so it's not...
Orson Welles clap that this got past the censors. we have male nudity. No, there wasn't. It was suggestive though because his groin was very well lit. Let's put it that way.
And sitting out in the face.
Well, you know what, Darlene? If they gave a nice view to the men watching the film,
they brought up Liz, and she's hard-titted.
Yes. She has a wet t-shirt and she's cold. And I thought, boy, okay, that's fair. You give a little bit to the ladies. A little bit of cheesecake to the ladies.
And their solution to this
is drop more dynamite.
Was drop dynamite again. 100
sticks of dynamite.
40%.
100 sticks of dynamite. And it looks like an A-bomb going off in the lake.
And Mike goes, I'm done. It's yours, Steve. It's yours. Steve has to hit the plunger.
So all the leeches die except one, and one kind of wanders off into the Everglades to fight the creature from the Black Lagoon at some point for dominance. And then the anacondas that get released from Hurricane Andrew. Later on.
Yes. Yeah. That is kind of sad seeing an anaconda try to swallow an alligator, and you see the alligator in that picture.
Yeah. But the anaconda exploded too, so it's okay. It's mutually assured destruction in that picture that you're talking about. But anyway, back to the movie. So it's a short movie, thank God. It is not great, but it's not as bad as what people think.
No.
So what worked, Darlene? What worked in this movie?
The pacing.
Pacing's good.
We actually had to put on, I will warn everyone, we watched it on Prime.
Amazon Prime.
We had to put on the subtitles.
Because the audio is a little wonky.
And sometimes the subtitles said, what?
Indecipherable. And I'm like, yes. Thank you for being honest. Amazon. What worked is the pacing, yes. I thought that Ken Clark playing Steve Benton actually did a good job. Unless it was about gun safety, where he was shoving a muzzle of a revolver into his girlfriend's face.
That's all producer problem.
That's a producer problem. Yeah, well, no, because it should have been her saying, I don't want a gun in my face because I don't know if there's...
She was looking right down the damn barrel.
It was a big gun. And come on, gun safety in movies. And this is most likely one of the most egregious examples of bad gun safety on film.
We're
His
reenactors, so
his
we
finger is on
really,
the trigger.
we really like to have people know gun safety.
You don't touch a trigger. You don't hold a gun towards a person. You don't point it at somebody's head at close range. You don't even point it towards somebody at close range. You just don't do these things.
Because you don't know if even if you knew the chamber was clearing,
You always assume it's not.
you always assume it's
This
not.
is safety. And the thing is that there were blanks on this set.
Yes.
And I don't care if that's a
And it
blank
was
or
all
not.
shotguns.
And well, it doesn't matter. It does not matter. If there was a blank in that gun and his finger just tightened a little bit, her face would have been blown off, even
yes.
with a blank.
If you don't know that, blanks do shoot shrapnel.
Yeah, but there's pressure wave. There's
yes, and there's also the pressure.
her cheek would have been blown off, peeled right back, and there's just no excuse for that. None at all. I don't care if there was only blanks being fired from shotguns in this movie. The fact is that guns were on the set.
And you were showing what not to do.
So that is a lesson that I would say a modern filmmaker can take away from this movie is watch this for what not to do with firearms on your goddamn set. But anyway, Ken Clark as Steve Benton did a pretty good job with the material he was given and actually was a decent fisheries and wildlife person who actually seemingly cared about the animals.
So they wrote that pretty good.
Yes.
Except they ended up with dynamite.
Did Yvette Vickers play a good harlot type cheating woman? Yes, I actually think she did a pretty good job to make a completely unlikable character. Like, she wasn't supposed to be likable, and she did a good job doing it.
And Cal came off as a sleazy guy.
He did. I felt bad for Dave, the erstwhile husband, who ends up killing himself. Like, there's the little bit of writing and dialogue that Dave does get endears you to him. You feel bad for him, and that means that's some decent writing.
But because they did do a sheriff that was your backwater,
typical backwater sheriff. Yeah,
that I don't want to do anything. And then there was the typical Porky and what was the other one?
Now before
drinking hooch in the P-row.
Yeah. So before we get into the what didn't work, I'm going to address the thing that I think does not fit into the what didn't work or in the category of what did work, and it's the costumes. Most people that see this movie are going to make fun of the costumes. The costumes aren't great. That's fair. The costumes...
They look like a person in a condom suit.
Yes, with things that are taped to the outside. But
what would you do? How would you do a giant leech?
For being a giant mutant leech that you normally don't see in the light, it's always dimly lit. You only see them like suckling on people a couple times. They're not bad. They're not good. I'm not saying that, hey guys, this is like a 6 out of 10 costume. I'm saying this is like a 4 out of 10 or a 3 out of 10. This is not like the worst of the worst.
Who decided to put suckers on all their little limbs?
I don't know. They're mutant leeches. Go with it. Like, this is not the worst costume we've ever seen by far. Correct?
No, that still goes to Creeping Terror.
There's a couple other movies that we've watched with like fishmen that just weren't really that good either. Creeping Terror is pretty bad. Creeping Terror is arguably,
but it has an excuse.
Yeah, it took them like they had to make it like a day before they started filming. This, it's not great, but it's not bad. So I'm not going to say that this is something that doesn't work. So let's go into what does not work now, Darlene. Go ahead.
Oh, I forgot to tell you one other thing that worked. The botanical gardens.
The sets for it?
Yeah.
Yeah, the outdoor sets. Yeah, no, the arboretum or arboretum. Yeah. Fine. Absolutely. It works well. Yeah, I agree. That worked well.
So what didn't work?
So what didn't work? Go ahead.
Stereotyping of characters.
I think that there weren't enough likable characters with lots of lines. Because a lot of the awful characters end up having a lot of the lines, like, Liz and Cal. and they're just kind of terrible people, and I don't really want to hear from them. Does it help build up the fact that they're terrible? Yeah, sure it does.
You get to see how terrible and...
But, like, the only person that's really likable that has a lot of lines is Steve. Nan is underused. I'll say that. Nan, like, that's one of the things that doesn't work. Nan is underused. They could have done more with Liz that was to make her a little sympathetic in some way.
And the doc shouldn't have been such a gung-ho, let's go do dynamite crap. Because he was a doctor.
I think that while the pacing was good, it felt like there was more to this movie that could have been done.
Okay, tell me.
And I don't know what it is. I'll be honest, I don't know what it is. It just feels like this movie could have had actually extra stuff in it that dealt with some of these side characters to build them up a little bit to make you feel a little more connected to them when they get killed. That's it. Like these two guys that go out and they're searching, they're getting paid for $50. Give me a minute back at their like cabin homes in the swamp, talking to loved ones or something like, "Hey, I'm going to go out and I'm going to help the sheriff find these bodies." They're talking to like a wife or a daughter or son or whatever.
I'll get $50 for
and
this.
That's going to make a big difference in their lives.
Like, give me a little bit. We'll go to Walt Disney World or something.
No. It's like, hey, we'll go and actually get you shoes, son.
Yeah.
Or something like that. Like, because these people are clearly not well off.
No.
But I want a little more. Like, there should be a little more in there to, like, endear you to them. They're not just there to make a profit and get drunk. That they're people.
And you don't even know what their work is.
They just get drunk in boats. Like, that's what it seems like. And I think that's a disservice to
the
side
there
characters.
would have been a nice thing as if Porky and Lean goes, "There's no fish in the lake. Why is there no fish in the lake?"
Yeah, they're out there fishing all the time.
I can't get enough to feed my family.
Or they're shrimping or something like that. I know that shrimping isn't a thing in the swamp, but
oh yeah, there's brown shrimp.
There's brown shrimp, but they're not likely doing that in the Everglades, right? They're like
no, but they could be crawdadding. They could have been.
There are things to do. Like they could be maybe even hunting alligator for alligator meat and selling it to like whoever. Like that's their business is they go out and hunt alligator and sell it to butchers or something like that.
And that would put them with knowing Steve.
Yeah, because they're having to deal with the fisheries and wildlife guy all the time. Like, okay. I don't know. See,
there needed to be more connection.
There needed to be more connection. There needed to be more stuff with these side characters to build them just a little. You don't need a lot, just a little. So while it might have been, 63 minutes, this could have been 70 minutes, and that extra 7 minutes, just giving little pieces to the other characters.
And why weren't alligators being...
They were.
Being floating up and...
Oh, they were getting eaten completely. Like they were
leeches don't eat.
I know they aren't. They never really explain that, but that's what I'm saying is that the alligators supposedly were just being completely eaten.
And what they said was they ran away from whatever it was.
Which is possible. I could see that. Like maybe the gators are just angry enough that they can fight these leeches off long enough to get away. And that's it. Like they're just big and mean enough. That's fine. Fair enough. So we've already said what works, what doesn't work, what is kind of in between with the costumes. I'm saying the costumes aren't great, but they're not awful.
They're not awful. I said that.
Yeah, they're not awful. Are they goofy looking? Yeah, yes. But they're used fairly well in this. They're used fairly well.
There were some scenes that it was completely black, and that's why I said it was dark. There was certain scenes that all you saw was movement.
Sure. So...
And that could be the bad quality of the film.
We've already also said what a modern filmmaker can take away from this with gun safety.
Yes.
Is there anything else we want to say? Are we going to recommend this film?
I think I would recommend this film.
Oh, wow. You're going to recommend it. Okay. I need to think about this for a moment. And
I did enjoy it.
You enjoyed it. Okay. I enjoyed it too. So yeah, I would recommend it. Now, again, this would be a fence-sitting one for me.
It's pretty much fitting, but it's right up the alleyway of all those monster.
And that's awful because most people consider this one of the worst, like, monster movies of the 1950s, but it really isn't. It's not that bad. It's decidedly average, but it's not unforgettable. That's the thing. Like, you can be average and forgettable. This is average, and I'm going to remember the Leeches. I'm going to remember how awful Liz is.
I'll remember how awful
I'm going to
Liz
remember
is.
Dave hanging himself in the jail. Like, there's things in this that are honestly...
I don't remember Dave doing it hanging him in the mat when we watched it.
Maybe it was edited out, because I know they edited certain things out. Like, quick story about MST3K. There is one of their early episodes is called Catalina Caper, and it's a color movie. I think it's from like the 1970s, and they planned on doing it. This got written into the contract. They're going to do it, and they had never seen it before. And this is season 2, and they sat down and watched it, and there ended up being like a 10-minute long rape sequence in it, and they were all utterly shocked. They had already blocked it in. They were locked into doing this movie, and they were utterly shocked at this. So what ended up having to happen is they had to edit out this whole chunk of it. And there's like a snide remark from Crow or something like that saying, boy, that was a strange cut or something like that. But it was there because they had to edit out this awful, awful, awful sequence. And it shortened the movie quite a bit. But I'm repeating this story because MST3K has been known to edit the film to make it either funnier, more disjointed, or to remove things that were slightly questionable.
Which that would have been. And it would have been a short thing because all you would have had to do is cut from
5 seconds worth of film.
Yeah, it was 5 seconds because all you saw was him hanging from the...
It was pretty shocking, though.
Yeah. And then you go into the scene of Liz, Doc, and Steve.
Yeah, because, I mean, there's a difference between being killed by a monster and then hanging yourself in a jail. Like, getting killed by a monster, that's silly.
Because it goes from them arresting him.
Yeah. But I'm just saying that being killed by a monster is silly.
So
you can keep that in, but somebody committing suicide by hanging in a jail is kind of...
yeah.
1990s Comedy Central kind of stuff. Like, you might not want that there. So, yeah, we're recommending this. It's not like a heavy recommendation. It's a light recommendation. It's not bad. It's fun.
If you like a lot of weird monster movies, this would be one of them I would say go.
I think next week, or I should say next week, next time, because we don't know when these episodes get released, generally once a week, but we're going to do Dr. X.
We've been saying we're going to do it.
And it'll be a big check from our Rocky Horror Picture Show.
And you got to figure out if you've got everything now.
I have to. So I'm Aaron.
And I'm Darlene. Good evening.
And keep watching the skies.
At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
Thanks for listening to this episode of This Week in Geek. Hungry for more? Check out our website at thisweekingeek.net. You can subscribe to the podcast, browse our Twitter and Instagram, and leave your thoughts on today's topics. If you'd like to give us some feedback, send us an email at feedback@thisweekingeek.net. Tune in next time, and remember,
lower your shields and surrender your listenership.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.